Hi, I'm Mark Unger, producer of Roundtable. Because we find this presentation so special, we really would like for you to see this. Please watch.
The camera is very pragmatic. It's a very simple instrument compared to other mediums. If you look at the camera and you say something like a painter would have to learn muscle memory with the paintbrush, or a musician would have to learn how to hold an instrument. People would say, well, film is dead, and then all of a sudden you will see a famous photographer, they use digital promoting film, and then all of a sudden they're saying the process is slow, or it's this and it's that. But the creativity part of photography doesn't have anything to do with format. I don't want to consider myself a traditionalist because photography is not that old to have traditional values per se, because you know, you would have to look at it like, well, what would digital be? If photography is traditional, then digital would be what, an infant? So, you know, if we look at how we study photography today, you have to balance both out.
Photography, especially classical refined film photography, is talking about the truth. It's realism. It's even in when you use it in form of art, it's reporting. But yes. My view of the digital photography, it actually have a capacity of creative fiction. To create a dream, create something that never existed.
Well, I have a question for you. With you stating that, what about the outcome and the output of digital photography? Because you have to realize we started photography in the 19th century. That was 70 plus years of photographs. Now you add that with the 20th century, which would be 100 years of photographs. Do you know that we have taken more photographs in this 21st century than the entire time photography has been invented? What do you think about that? Do you think that with digital, can you overdose on it?
Hello and welcome to Single Shot, the show that talks about photography. Last time we started the conversation with Shaun, a great photographer, philosopher, and historian of photography, about the success in photography. We was talking about broad spectrum of ideas in theory of photography, and today we would like to get a little bit more concrete and talk about what actually you need to do in order to be a successful photographer. And I would ask Shaun to share his experience. We've seen a lot of talented photographers in New York City. Some of them succeed, some of them don't. What underlines, in my understanding, success is most of the photographers who actually get there doing things in a very orthodox way, following the specific stages and basically following the crowd, adding just a little bit from themselves. What strikes me very interesting when we look at you is that you did a lot of things not just out of the box, but basically going against the current. They advise you not to bring in studio photography the style, feel, and understanding of light of street photography. You did, and you succeeded in doing it. They're advising you to stay with current technology and try to take advantage of everything new that comes on the market, and the more it advances, the more trend is visible. You are preserving a look and feel of the old film, and you're doing it so masterfully. So, first obvious question, how you managed to do it? You're obviously a successful photographer who went against the stream and still managed to succeed. It's quite a remarkable thing. How you did it?
Thank you. And thank you for having me again. Well, to answer your question, I think that it starts with hard work. So I would have to say that, and then applying yourself, showing your work, getting a portfolio and showing it to people. As far as style, that's something that you have to find on your own and then incorporate it into your own eye. You have to find your eye first. And I am a believer that in order to find your eye, you have to study the greats or the people in the past that, whether they did photography this way or that way, still there's a resource for you to learn from, and then do your own kind of photography. That's where it all starts for me. As far as being successful is just putting my work out there, reaching out to editors, reaching out to people in general, curators, and they looked at my work and they say, okay, we can work with him. But it's not always easy in terms of being successful with it. It takes a lot of rejection as well. You have to balance it out.
Every new idea obviously generates resistance, and I'm pretty sure the idea of street photographic style in a serious studio environment is something so different and so niche that you've probably seen a lot of it. So how did you handle it? How would you explain to people that this is not wrong, it's different than you?
Well, you have to know your eye. You have to be confident in your eye. I think that when you take a photograph, how do you look at it? Is it good or great? Or is it bad? Or is it a lesson within that photograph? As far as studio work, because I started off in street photography, if we have to put me in a box, that's my foundation. And when I go into a studio, I apply the same kind of understanding. You're still photographing people. The only difference with studio, you might work with a team, makeup, hair, fashion stylists. And everybody might have an opinion, but they're putting it all on you, because at the end of the session, it's on you, the photographer. You can't blame the makeup artist, you can't blame the hairstylist, you can't blame the wardrobe stylist. So the same with street photography. When you're out there on the street, you have to know that moment. You can't blame the person that's walking by and say, hey, you didn't make my street photograph come out. So you have to take the responsibility for it, and you also have to learn as you go along. So I incorporate both of them just by trying to get to know people and realizing people. I think that photography is very humane, and that's one of the common goals within street or fashion or editorial or even a portrait session. It's just having that conversation, that communication, to be able to photograph people, and people open up to you.
So responsibility, taking the shot responsibly, that's
Yes.
the key. This
Yes.
is underlying, interesting. So responsibility to whom, and what? To photography in general, to humanity, to yourself,
To your eye.
to your eye.
And your unique creativity, if you want creativity to be there. Sometimes you can go in the back and be inspired by people and pay homage towards someone. But it all starts with your eye, what you see. That's what's important. No matter what kind of photography you're doing. The field of photography can be wedding, it can be birthday, it can be so many things. It has to be your eye. What do you see? What do you want other people to see?
In my understanding, the underlying difference of street photography and studio photography is actually, in street photography, you have to follow what you see. Most
Yes.
of the time, you can't command and modify the events. The most you can do is to scream to somebody you want to turn around, turn back, and that's about as much influence you have. While in studio, you have almost full control. You control how the light is done. You control how the person look. You can command them how to turn and how to do it. And you still have the genuine look. First of all, how you're achieving that. It's not so easy, because when people are conscious that they're being photographed, no matter what they do, it's actually hard for them not to show one other way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you have to see, the interesting part that you just mentioned was control. Actually, when you're not controlling them, that's when you photograph. That's when you get the moment. Because you can have someone sit down in a chair, get hair and makeup done. They can sit down in front of you and they know that they're being photographed, like you said. But then it's just that second where they just forget where they're at, or they just let themselves come out. And you can photograph them and you'll see that. It might, when they first be photographed for a magazine or something, they might smile. They give you the I guess you say the stereotypes of studio photography. They sit down, they do this and that, because it can be stressful to be photographed. So I think some people already have like this pattern that they follow. And then probably because I use film, I work on film only, probably the second, or I say the second roll at times, you see people start to unwind. And then you might ask them something and then they'll open up and then you photograph. And that's when you can see the difference. At times that's not the photograph that is picked, because they might want the, as you say, the look. But then when you look at your contact sheets and you're like, wow, this when I was having this conversation with this person, I might have asked them when was their birthday, or where are they from, and you can see that. You can see it in their face, like they were actually opening up beyond makeup, hair, or fashion.
So just engaging them in conversations help.
Yes.
Some guys using cognac, some just
Yes. It
Oh.
is.
this is great. And sorry, not,
It's okay.
yeah. So what I'm trying, what I was trying to ask. So you're talking about purely artistic shots, or actually commercial assignments? In which you're
Well,
doing it?
it depends. I mean, if you're hired to photograph a person, place, or thing, you have to follow what they're paying you to do.
That's exactly why I was asking it, because all this approach seems to be beautiful and plausible when you're just trying to achieve artistic results, and accidental result
Yes.
is more than acceptable. In many ways it's desirable, but when you're on assignment, you from the beginning know what you need to have on your negative when you're done.
Yes, you do. But I think you also have to, I think the more that you work with a person or editor, they tend to give you more room to, like, you can do this and do that. But yes, when you first start, I think that some people, they approach photography, when they hire a photographer, they think it's easy. They're like, oh, just photograph this and that. And then you're like, it's not that easy. Just pushing a button and just, you know, whatever kind of photograph they want. I wouldn't say moment. But I think as time goes on, if someone likes your photography and they commission you to photograph their portrait, or you have to do something for a newspaper or a magazine, they kind of give you leeway. And I think like some photographers like Richard Avedon and Irving Penn, they actually found a way to slide through it. You know, they did commercial work, and then at the same time they backed off and put their own little hint of you know, individuality in it.
Well, the hint of individuality and creativity is expected, but overall they still want to have a product that they would be able to use for the purpose
Of
for which
course.
they commission it. Yeah.
Of course. I remember Mario Testino, I think he said he photographed Madonna one time with no makeup. And that was like a personal thing. And then he said when he saw the prints, she was like, you can't show these photographs. Not because, you know, she was against it, but it wasn't commercial. So he said he completely understood. And that's also artists, if you want to be an artist as a photographer, you have to have, I guess you could say, tough feelings to understand everybody's not going to accept, you know, your personal work. And I think that's another education as well. Photographers need to understand that there's a difference between commercial and then the personal work, as you say. Commercial is, I wouldn't say easy to do, but it's not difficult. In terms of your personal work, you have to figure things out. With anything that someone hires you to do, you can pretty much like, oh, okay, I know what they want. But
We'll be back after this brief pause. Okay, we're back from the pause, and we was talking about commercial photography and the ways to get your client to accept your work. I have a question to you. Did you ever hear from your clients or just people trying to assess your work? Oh, it looks so great, like it's a picture, like it's a painting.
yes, I have heard that. And I don't take that personal, because I know that painting has a long history of teaching us how to look at things. So in a way it can be a compliment, but if you look at from the perspective of being a photographer, you can also say, wait, I don't want it to be a painting or look like a painting. So I think the educational part of knowing both is why I don't become offended by it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say, that it is meant to be a compliment, and for a lot of people, just seeing real image is not enough. If they see it to be somewhat picturesque, somewhat related to brush and stroke, for them it is a sign of it being more professional somehow. And as we mentioned in our conversations last time, there is this tendency that existed in the early stage of photography when photographers was just directly trying to mimic painters.
Yes.
They was trying to use their composition, they was trying to use their props, their standard figurines even they would add to the photo. And then it subsided a little bit after invention of better film, which would allow to make the photos more vivid, more realistic, more crispy. Then there was AP standards, there was National Geographic's, Magnum, all 9 yards.
Yes.
Photography became to be reality on its own, so real that nobody would even object and question it. And now we are seeing a very curious moment when it actually makes its large comeback. With emergence of thousands of pictures, the photo editing software on a grand scale and in numerous versions, even included in smartphones, photographs that are not real but looking more like a painting becoming to be again a trend. And I know that's something you never was so much of approval, and you do believe that photography have to try to stay realistic and to basically tell the truth.
Yes.
So
I think that, I'm kind of balanced with that. Even though I only use film, I also always say to people that digital should look digital. In terms of just photography should look like photography, whether it's film or digital. But as you stated, yes, the software and things like that can make a photograph seem like a painting or graphic art in some situations.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that if we fall back into that trap, because what you were talking about, that was called the pictorialism period, which was in the late 19th century. I think if we fall back into that kind of trap, it will push photography back in terms of what is a photograph. Because I think in the 20th century, we really came to a conclusion of what a photograph could be, would be, or should be. Whether you was looking at it from group, what was it, F64, or whether you was looking at it from Gary Winogrand or Robert Frank or Henri Cartier-Bresson, we knew it was something. We knew it wasn't a painting. But now is like, I think some people could look at a photograph and be like, is that a paint? What is, like, is an innocent, confusion. But I do believe that photography should look like photography. But I don't know right now. I think that technology might make photography look like technology.
Oh, it's indeed very true that underlying idea of what happened in the last quarter of 20th century was that photographic idea was very directly, very vividly formulated. We actually finally understood what we mean by photography.
Yes.
And that indeed created a situation when if you engage in this form of art, you know exactly what you're doing.
Yes.
So don't you think it's in a way restricting? Maybe it's just a step in the process. Maybe we're looking at the next step emerging soon.
It could be. It will be interesting. I mean, if I had to take a guess, I would say that just because I know the history, I know a little bit about the history of photography, that it might not, a photograph should look like a photograph. Because I think that if it goes back to looking like a painting or anything that's not a photograph, other mediums will be able to stand on top of it. Just as painters will say, for years they were saying that you consider it plastic arts. Like they would say that photography wasn't that, because all you're doing will be pushing a button, a shutter button. So you compare that to now, how far photography has came in 192 years. If we go back, it's just going to push it back. Even though I understand the technological part, like we need to evolve, we need to test things. But
No, the evolution for the sake of evolution brings more evil than good. I mean, look
Yes.
at Russian Revolution.
yes, yes,
That's how it ends. But why we have to only focus on going back per se? I mean, yes, if you're trying to make a photograph to look like a painting, to mimic the existing brush strokes, to use the existing devices, visual devices that being used by the painters since Toulouse-Lautrec,
yes,
it really makes no sense. But what if we can actually employ those devices to create something new instead of just mimicking what existed? I totally agree with you, don't get me wrong, that making a step back, especially into a different media, not just makes no sense, but is going against everything the art is about.
yes,
Artists, by definition, are most progressive people. We actually the ones who making things to move in this world. I know that politicians and scientists believe
they
back different, but
yes,
in the end of the day, we're the ones who are actually saying that this can happen.
yes,
We are the first ones who are actually imagining the future, imagining how it can happen. And in my personal understanding, photography right now have an opportunity. I'm not saying it happened, and I'm not saying that it even certain to happen, but there is an opportunity and there is a chance that maybe photography at one point will not just depict the reality we see, or maybe manipulate reality a little bit to show it from a specific angle, but provide people with a dream.
it
Not-
could. So do you think there will be? Are you talking about subconsciously? Do you think that the photograph could actually enter someone's subconscious?
Basically, we have a whole set of new devices that never existed before.
Yes.
Just a few days ago, I've seen a gentleman who took a picture on a boat crossing Hudson, and right away created a concrete physical copy of what he photographed. It just wasn't possible even 5 years, 10 years ago. Technology just didn't exist. Now it's possible to take a picture and have a physical representation of what you did in your hands. This is something that we never had. All these filters that make a picture to look like a painting, if applied to a certain degree, will create an effect that's never been seen before. Your photograph can be easily made to look like Bresson's photo or daguerreotype. There is a
Yes.
filter for that. But if you use just a touch of what is provided with this, you might add to the photograph a touch that never existed before to give it a look that never was used. Basically, not to create a completely different reality, but based on the existing reality, create a dream about what it could be. To create something that never existed before. Basically, if you would compare it to literature, what we do with film photography and AP or Magnum approach to photography, or even modern art photography approach, is one other form of realism. Maybe some of it is Charles Dickens realism, some of it is modern Japanese realism, but
Yes.
it's realism. But we don't have Ray Bradbury, we don't have Jay Wagner in photography.
Interesting. But do you think that what you just stated, even though it's progressive and it's innovative, do you think that it's forgetting about the moment? Because I think that we're so technologically driven, we don't even see the moment anymore. And everything was about the moment. In photography, that's the heart of photography, the moment. I think that when you start talking about creating things and being able to do these things,
This was a single shot. We'll get back to those ideas. back with single shot, and now, since we're reaching our end, it's probably time to summarize. So basically, what I was saying that we're probably working right now on possible means to create a dream based on photography, and you were asking me, what about this decisive moment?
Yes, the moment.
So I don't know, maybe that would finally end up to be two different medias for two different purposes.
I don't know. I mean, that'll be the interesting part. I think that with photography, it has to be about the moment. Just as painting is about the mind, well, I say painting is the mental, photography is the moment. It has to be about the moment. I mean, I don't think technology can replace that, even though I think it's given it a good run, but the moment is what counts. When you look at photography 10 years from now, you want to see that moment. You don't want to see innovative technology.
Oh. Moment definitely will never be replaced with technology, and that was definitely a beautiful moment and very nice shot for single shot with Shaun La. Thank you very much. It's always really inspiring to talk to you. Hopefully we will see you again on our show one day.
Yes, anytime, and you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. It was very inspiring. This is the single shot. We'll be back next week with another discussion about photography and about its theory, past, probably future. I don't know if we will get the right answers, but we surely will try very hard. Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you.
I hope you found that worth watching as much as I did. I'm Mark Unger for Roundtable. Thanks for watching.